Hello, my name is David Higgins and I'm a lecturer in English Literature at the University of Leeds. The title of this podcast is Language and Meaning in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Now I'm aware that that's a rather vague and open title, but I hope as the podcast continues you'll see the logic of it and the way in which I'm really trying to focus on the relationship between form and content in this poem. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a poem that I've been fascinated with since I first read it at school. But it's also a text that I've always found rather difficult. And one of the purposes of this podcast is to think about the challenge of the poem and how we might try and tackle it. It's also designed to give you a sense of the study of literature at university. And one of the things I do in this podcast is to engage with the work of other critics and theorists. This engagement with previous research, really regardless of the discipline, is a key aspect of university study. One initial challenge of the poem is that Coleridge made extensive revisions to it after it was first published, so there are in effect several different versions of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I'm going to focus on the first version, published in Lyrical Ballads in 1798, though I will refer at one point to a later version of the poem. The first version contains a lot of archaic language, that is, language that was old-fashioned even at the time that Coleridge wrote the poem. So I'll say something about the poem's language and how we might deal with it. What makes the poem particularly fascinating for me is that lots of strange things happen in it that aren't really explained. Its mysteriousness has encouraged critics to read it symbolically, that is, to read what happens in the poem, the particular events of the poem, as somehow representing some broader facet of human experience. And it's significant, I think, that the mariner is never actually named. That encourages us to read him as a type or a symbol of something more than just one person. On the slide, you'll see a list of what I've identified as different critical approaches to the poem. The first one is displaced autobiography, and by that I mean people have read it in terms of Coleridge's own life history and seen the Ancient Mariner as a version of Coleridge, sort of projected into this strange universe. Another reading is of it as a religious story of sin and redemption, and you'll be aware that the poem contains lots of Christian imagery, and there's a certain logic to that interpretation.